and welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. My name is Ben, and with me is...
Miss Minchin.
You took Minchin. I was going to give you Minchin as a joke.
Yeah, I thought you would, so I just got ahead of it. I just did it for you. I was like, you can't give me a bad character if I do it first. Ha!
You're right. I can't do that. And that's because this week we watched my pick, which was 1995's A Little Princess.
And I'm delighted that it was your pick. I wasn't expecting it, and I am thrilled that you went there. So, do you want to give us a succinct and equally whimsical synopsis of this cinematic delight, and then we will get into it?
I promise nothing succinct or whimsical.
Well, that's it. I'm out. That's it. I'm done.
Set in World War I, Sarah Crewe, a bright and imaginative girl raised in India by her loving father. When her father is called to fight in the war, Sarah is sent to Miss Minchin's boarding school in New York, a stern institution where wealth and status determines one's treatment. At first, Sarah is treated as a privileged student, enchanting her classmates with vivid tales of Indian folklore and her unshakable belief that all girls are princesses. But when word arrives that her father is missing and presumed dead, her fortune is seized and she is reduced to a serving girl at the school. Despite hardships, Sarah holds onto her kindness and imagination, inspiring those around her with hope. As the mistreatment from Miss Minchin intensifies, Sarah's inner strength becomes her greatest weapon. In the movie's climax, Sarah reunites with her father, proving that magic can be found even in the darkest moments.
So, a few facts for us. I'm particularly thrilled about the director of this one. So,
completely surprised myself with this one.
You didn't know?
I didn't know. It directed in 1995, released in 1995, directed by Alfonso Cuarón. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Children of Men, and Gravity. I believe this is probably his first English-speaking film that he directed. And yeah, I had no idea of the connection. I'm going to ask you to help pronounce the cinematographer's name.
That'll be Emmanuel Libeziki.
Frequent collaborator of Alfonso Cuarón. Written by Richard Lavagranze and Elizabeth Chandler, starring Eleanor Bron, Liam Cunningham, Liesl Matthews, Rusty Schwimmer, Arthur Mallet, Vanessa Chester, and Errol Sithal. Music by Patrick Doyle. Runtime of 97 minutes, nice and brisk. Budget of $17 million. There's no magic breakdown for this. There's only US domestic. For its US domestic box office was $10,015,449. I chose this movie for a few reasons. One, as far as movies go, its title, I think, begets a certain view of what this movie will be, and the movie really isn't that, but it is. And it is an important movie in my cinema journey. It is the first movie I ever remember having like a sad emotional response to the point where I cried. I even cried a couple of times watching it this time. It is one of those movies that is, I think, very well made and gets a little bit forgotten in the pantheon of films.
Yeah, I think it's a film that was well received when it came out, but obviously Alfonso Cuarón's pedigree now as a filmmaker is what makes it a particularly interesting rewatch, aside from being a good film in and of itself. You know, I don't want to take away that I do think this is a good movie. It's just a bit more of an unusual movie in the sense that, you know, his style is very, very unique to him. And there was this period in the 90s where he was, I guess, breaking into Hollywood, where he wasn't necessarily being hired to be Alfonso Cuarón. He was being hired because they needed a director. So it was this interesting kind of tension. It was really this movie and his next movie, Great Expectations, where he was kind of a bit more of a director for hire, it felt like, anyway, to have a look at those films. And yeah, he's trying to put his stamp on it, if you want to use the auteur word, and say that he had a very unique sensibility, and he's trying to put his stamp on these other commercial works in a way that I really feel like the first time he was able to put truly perhaps his unique stamp on a commercial work was Harry Potter and the Prisoner of
Yeah.
Azkaban, where they hired him to be him, and they said, this is our franchise needs you specifically, as opposed to, we need a director. You're halfway interesting, we'll grab you, which
You're
is kind
halfway
of,
interesting.
well, that's really like, when someone's untested, the
Yeah.
studio doesn't necessarily want them to fully be themselves. They want them to just be yourself a little bit. Just be yourself a little bit,
Just a little bit.
And you can kind of see that here. Like, I do feel like the visual flair is there. And look, I know that you said I was supposed to be the person to help you pronounce his name, but Emmanuel, um, it could be, I've always said Libeziki, but I think that's wrong now looking at it. Like, Lubezki. Okay.
Lubezki. Yeah.
Lubezki. Let's say Lubezki. Look, I know him on paper as Alfonso Cuarón's longtime cinematographer. So the two of them make a beautiful image together. And you can definitely see that at play here, but you can't see all of the things that their collaboration would turn into. Like, for instance, in this movie, I can't really recognize the now signature long takes of Alfonso Cuarón, where that's really what he does. He puts together these really exquisite long takes and oneers that don't cut and go through the whole movie, but he's not really
Children of Men
doing.
comes to mind when I think of
Absolutely. But
Warner.
even
Yeah.
Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban has incredibly long takes. Gravity has incredibly long takes. So, but he's not doing that here. We don't really see that. It's a much more kind of restrained sort of look. Still a very beautiful kind of poetic look, but just not quite the signature look that we were seeing yet. I always love that, looking at where directors and cinematographers maybe come from when they're just sort of exploring what would become their signature style later.
It definitely does have flair, though. As a film that could be such a simple story to tell, from the set or the practical building location of the children's home to the imaginary storytelling scenes of the Indian folk tales, there is a sort of magical quality that is on the screen with the image that presents us, right? It reminds me very much of looking at that children's home reminds me of like a Roald Dahl-esque kind of. It's not crooked, but it's exaggerated. Everything in that home is exaggerated. The creaky doors, the floors, the fancy parts. It's all kind of a little bit, not a lot, but just a little bit bigger than real world. Even looking at the outside, it's in a courtyard and it's large and it's squeezed between buildings and
Got a turret like a fairy tale castle to it
it has
somehow.
character.
Mm.
The everything on the screen has character, whether it is a hospital, whether it is the home, whether it is the street she walks down when she's a servant. Everything on the screen has character, and I think it really gives a story that is quite simple in nature so much depth and kind of depth of field, almost like just a little bit. You look past it and there's a little bit to find in the screen.
Well, it brings you into a world in a way that a lot of films don't do. And honestly, it's also something where if you look at this film on paper, yes, there's an element of whimsy built into it, but it didn't have to quite go this far. And you can see that the craft and the care is what maybe elevates this perhaps above what it otherwise could have been. It is a film that has a fairy tale like structure as well. The idea that we've got Sarah, who is our protagonist, and she is very much a sort of Cinderella style character, if you
Yes,
like, where she doesn't necessarily have a huge journey or a massive arc, which actually kind of surprised me. She has a firm belief that is true at the start of the movie, and then that belief gets tested throughout the movie, but she never actually wavers
lose.
or
Yeah,
abandons that belief, and then in the end that belief is rewarded. That belief that all girls are princesses, that belief that imagination is paramount and is important to our lives, really. So it was interesting to actually look at the character as the lead character and say, you influence people around you, but you don't actually have a really, you know dramatic arc yourself. And obviously, she enriches everyone around her and she makes their lives better and changes things. She's a catalyst, but she's not necessarily someone who arcs in a huge way, which is kind of unusual for a protagonist, even in a modern fairy tale structure.
Even the two characters in the film that have the least kind of cartoon or color to them are her and her father. Like everyone else is an exaggeration of a trait or a thing, or is a bit larger than life. Like each of the girls has a thing. Miss Minchin, her sister, everyone's kind of large and either comical or mean or colorful, except for her, unless she's telling a story, and her father, who is played wonderfully by Liam Cunningham, but is not really that much in the film other than to have like dad moment at the start and kind of dad moment at the end. And to be that kind of presence that has obviously built this self-assuredness in her and to build this kind of belief in her, like she has all these things because her dad has instilled them in her. But yeah, it's weird that the rest of it is kind of really interesting and catches the eye, but those two don't really.
No, they anchor it really, is what you could sort of say there. I do find this film, much as I love it, and I really do love it. Well, actually, let's stay on some things that I think work really well. So I think it's fairly iconic from this movie, the idea of her drawing the magic
Circle.
circle and then sleeping in it when she's relegated to the attic. I think that is a really powerful image. It's certainly an image that I remembered from this film, even though it's been many years since I've seen it. It was something that stuck with me, and it was really my enduring memory of the entire movie. So plus as well, the fantasy sequences of her storytelling I think are really lavishly produced. And I also quite like a lot of the storyline revolving their neighbors as well, and the
Yeah.
connection that they have, and bringing those two worlds together. So there's a lot to like here when you actually look at it. But what about you? What's your enduring memories of this film?
I had forgotten the circle, and I mentioned
Really?
that I was watching this movie to a couple of people, and almost without a fault, they mentioned the circle. My enduring memories of this are the emotional beats of definitely at the ending when she sees her father and he doesn't remember her, and you're just like, oh my god, this is going to break me. I also remember her friendship with the serving girl quite a lot. I thought that was kind of, even for 1995, it was a nice touch in this story. And I also remembered the kind of cartoony, Matilda-y nature of the children's home, or the school for girls. Those were the things that kind of really clicked in. My probably the scene I remember the most was the scene the night before they dream about eating a big feast because they're not going to be fed for the next 24 hours, and then the next morning they wake up and it's all there, and like it's been done up with silks and food, and it's from the neighbor next door and his monkey and all that sort of stuff. I remember those kind of really vivid images. I have one thing in this film that I didn't remember at all that I 100% had issue with.
Oh, really?
And I'm curious to see if you had the same issue. And I actually feel bad about having this issue because I feel like you're supposed to cut some leeway for this thing, but I couldn't. The actress that played Sarah, her
Yeah.
dialogue delivery was so breathy and kind of one notish. Like, oh yes, it's a child actor. I feel awful, but like there was no inflection or change in pattern, even when she was upset or scared, or it was always following that same kind of the same flow. And I got used to it pretty quickly, but at the start I found it a little bit jarring.
Yeah, I didn't bump on that. And the reason I didn't bump on that was because of what I was talking to you about with regard to the character, and the idea that the character doesn't have a super strong arc. It's more a character where things happen to them. So, therefore, I felt like that delivery was an artifact of the writing and the character that was there. That's what
Yeah.
was called for in that circumstance, in my opinion. So no, I didn't actually bump on it. I did recognize it because
Yeah.
yes, it's notable. It's I suppose you could say samey, but the thing for me was I was like, well, samey but suitable, you know? So in a way it's like this was likely
It definitely
directed this way.
doesn't ruin anything. It's just like
Mm,
eventually it got into my head of like, duh, just the pattern of it. It stuck
yeah.
with me.
I actually had, for all the things I really like about the movie, which was a lot, and we just talked about it, production design, cinematography, all of that idea of whimsy, some of the interesting structural stuff, I did have some stuff that didn't land as well for me. The first is when we look at this film, I feel like it does have a bit of an uncomfortable tension between being a studio 90s children's film, which was a very specific thing of what we would expect, and then also being a little bit of an art house character drama. And those two things sit a little bit uncomfortably together at times because we have things like, the, I can't remember her name, but the sister
Played
character.
by Rusty Schwimmer, but yeah,
Yes,
I
played
forget
by
her name.
Rusty Schwimmer. Amelia Minchin, there it is.
Yeah.
So, who's Miss Minchin's sister. And she does a lot of very big character choices, and the way that her character is written, it's written that way. It's not a criticism of the actress. It's just, she'll do a silly run up the stairs where she's huffing and puffing, and not in a realistic way, in a way that you might see in a movie like.
She's comedically melodramatic.
Exactly, comedically melodramatic. And you can see if you were a child, this would be really funny, right? It's supposed to be funny. It would
I
be
laughed a couple of
funny.
times.
It would be something to enjoy and is there for the children, but it is not a realistic portrayal. That's not how people actually behave in real life. So there's this naturalism to a lot of the performances, and then there are moments that are completely over the top in that sense. And even when she exits the film with the milkman and she falls on him, I'm like, well, this belongs in Robin Hood Men in Tights, whereas we have moments where we've got functionally, this abusive,
Child abuse.
yeah, right, which is happening simultaneously in the same film. So these things don't always sit well together. The idea that Miss Minchin at the end of the film is very neatly and kind of impossibly ends up working for the 10-year-old chimney sweep. I'm like, this is at odds to what we believe about this world that we've been presented with here. So I don't think, and particularly when you actually think about that, not from the perspective of a child, but from the perspective of an adult watching the movie, Miss Minchin is not a nice person. That is obvious. She, probably deserves to go to jail. But in terms of observable behavior by the police and others, she actually hasn't done anything that would cause her to lose her position at the school, right? She's gone after the child. And again, in that time and in that place, even the conditions that she's put the children in the attic, yes, questionable, probably not a fireable offense, actually, sadly, at that point in time.
The
So,
only thing she does that would be reprehensible in the eyes of the adults is right at the end when she sees the dad and doesn't say, yeah, that's him.
which I think would have been very easy for her to say, I didn't recognize you, I've
Yeah.
only met you once, which, and people might be like, sure, but still, again, unlikely that she's going to end up, and you might sort of say, well, what are you doing, Jim? You're picking holes in this children's film. But the point is, if this film was Dunstan Checks In, I wouldn't care, right? Because that is a different vibe. But this is a film that attempts, on the one hand, to have this very naturalistic and uh, serious kind of story, and then on the other hand, does these very broad moments, and it does just clash for me a little bit.
Well, with the character of Miss Minchin, I think it is most clearly shown. Like, there is a scene where she is in the attic and she is hammering Sarah. It's like, you're not a princess. You'll never be a princess, blah, 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 blah. Not all girls are princesses. And Sarah defies her. She goes, well, no, all girls are princesses. And you see her in a beautiful acting moment break without saying a word. Like, Sarah wins that conversation. And the way she kind of reacts is to lock her in and say, you're not getting fed for 24 hours. Like, that's her ultimate comeback. But there's a moment of acting there that is real. It's like, you kind of want to know, why doesn't Miss Minchin feel like she's a princess?
Yeah.
I want to know what happened to her, and you suspect it's something to do with her father, the way she kind of touches her cheek and things like that. There is a lot of kind of unspoken storytelling in that moment that is wonderful. And
Yes.
probably in a book you would get more of. But in the movie you don't. But you're right, there's this really grounded acting moment. And then a little bit later on, you have her sister falling out a window and doing all these things. I do want to bring up also Rusty Schwimmer. She is a fantastic comedic talent, and she's in a lot of movies. In this movie, she reminded me of an Australian actress, Magda Zubanski. Um, just kind of that wonderful facial play of the comedic moment, plus kind of the larger than life. And even she shows vulnerability in this movie. She is a person who is not suited to this life, who is gentle, who is domineered by her sister, who just wants to live happily ever after with a simple milkman. And you kind of, it's a really nice story. And I think Rusty plays it with such a little nice touch of vulnerability with her slapstick humor on top. But yeah, those two actresses in this film give you the two complete opposite ends of the spectrum that you're talking about.
Mm.
And I just think it's wonderful that they should be recognized, especially that Minchin acting moment in the attic. That is perfect acting.
It is. It's also something that frustrates me as well with that, which is the impact of you know Miss Minchin's sister leaving with the milkman is not explored, which just kills me because this would be huge for Minchin to realize her sister has abandoned her, but we don't actually ever get that
Well, the
scene
movie
of.
wraps up pretty quickly
It
after that.
really does. I'm looking at it going, are there deleted scenes here where, because really to watch that character have their comeuppance, sure, we get the moment with Chimney Sweep and Sarah wins, but really her whole world kind of crumbles because of Sarah here, and what Sarah has done. But we should see the impact of her sister leaving and what that does to her psychologically as part of her fall there, which again, I feel like I'm just going absolutely over the top with this film. But again, the film's good enough that it kind of wants you to go there, right? It wants that
Well, you
last
want
little
more.
piece. Yeah.
It's good enough that you want more. Um, I also want to highlight the panto-esque element in this film of Liam Cunningham being her father and playing the prince in the story. I really enjoy those elements. It's kind of like the Peter Pan-esque of the father playing Hook and all those sort of things. And it actually took me a minute to recognize it in this film. I think it was probably the second set of storytelling that she did that he's in it. I'm like, oh, that's him as well.
Well, he's
Um,
painted blue, so
yeah, it's not the easiest thing to tell. It actually really is if you pay attention.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was really kind of, I don't know what it is about those that kind of that panto esque like trope in films and stories. I do really enjoy that kind of reusing of the father figure in a separate story. It just, I don't know, it lights a bit of imagination in me, I suppose, because obviously she's telling the story and she would imagine the characters a certain way, and she would obviously use somebody from her real life, and her most important person in her life is her father, so it gets put into the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I really liked those sequences as well. So it's just, as you say, the movie does wrap up quickly. Another character who doesn't really get their turnaround explained is the bully character, where the very last thing that Sarah did was, put a quotes here, air quotes here, curse on her. And then at the end, they have a hug. And it's a little bit like, one of those things I was like, well, we're hugging because it's the end of the movie, not because you two have actually resolved your issues with one another. So again, it's something where I get it. It's a children's film. You want to get out of there quickly because once the key tension is over, you need to wrap it up. But at the same time, I did just feel like, oh, we spent a lot of time on that dynamic. We spent a lot of time on that plot thread, and we're not really getting to see it resolved.
Yeah, it's not like a Harry and and Dursley kind of hug at the end where you're like, okay, they've earned that kind of thing. Um, you say it wraps up quickly because the tension's over. I think probably a lot of it is to do with also keeping attention spans of children. It's that conflict you were talking about. This movie moves. The slowest part is probably the beginning to a little extent, like them coming from India, setting up the children's home. But once she's in that school, it goes so fast. And even like the next door neighbors, the ones that you kind of like really enjoy, like their story is very quickly kind of, you see one scene, he's lost his son's going off to war. The next scene, he's lost his son. The third scene, they're going to the hospital to see if it's his son. It's not. They're taking home a random soldier. And then the fourth kind of wrap up scene is kind of them like finishing the movie. And he's bought the school and all that sort of stuff. Like it is, their story is very rapid in this as well. And it's kind of just that side effect of, you're right, it feels like scenes were cut out. Like at 97 minutes, it feels like there was another 2 bully scenes. And it feels like there was another 1 or 2 neighbor scenes. And it feels like there was another Miss Minchin scene after Rusty left that all just kind of got picked out.
And yeah, maybe there was, maybe there wasn't, but it feels like a film that could have been a little bit more complete. And maybe that was the right call. We'll never know because I haven't seen an extended cut of it. And also, I don't know how this film would play for an actual child. I keep looking at it going, I was interested, but I'm nearly 40 and I'm appreciating lots of interesting stuff regarding character and production design and cinematography. I'm like, would a 9-year-old like the movie, or is that pace completely necessary just to keep their attention span? Like, I don't think my kids would find this movie particularly interesting. Maybe moments of it, but I don't know if they'd sit for the whole thing, to be honest.
I
So
I saw this when I was 9 or 10 for the first time. I remember, I think, seeing it on the big screen, but I don't know if that's true of my memory. But as I said, the reason that this kind of stuck with me throughout my whole entire life is this was like the first time I remember seeing a movie that was, look, it's not this, but I'm saying this is what I would have thought as a small child, a girl's movie.
yeah.
It was not a boys' movie. It wasn't Power Rangers. It wasn't any of those kind of He-Man or anything like that. It was a more story-based movie about a little girl. And I remember just being wrapped from start to finish. This movie, because it moved fast, and as a kid, you're not noticing the gaps we're talking about.
Mm.
Because as a kid, I think your imagination helps, right? You just kind of fill in the gaps sometimes. Like,
Well, you're as a kid, you're interested in the kids. So the
yeah,
kids' storylines are the ones that are the most interesting to you. And here's me saying, "Oh, that adult storyline didn't fully get resolved." And it's like, "Yeah, you're right. The kids don't care." Like,
no. But it's almost like what the kids in that school would have seen. They would have
mm,
only seen those bits of the story and made up the rest. But yeah, as a kid, I remember being locked in on this film. This film and The Secret Garden, I both enjoyed a lot as a kid. And they were not in my typical wheelhouse of Star Wars or anything like that. So yeah,
yeah, nice. I do think as well that there's a lot of kids acting in this movie, and I think that would have been really challenging to direct.
it would have been tough.
When you look at, was this guy a great choice for Harry Potter, and then you look at this film, you're like, oh, absolutely, sequences of fantasy and whimsy plus child actors, and you've got to work with them through that. I think he was absolutely the right choice there. I do wonder if sometimes the performances might have been difficult to get. And the reason that I think that, or speculate on that, is because there are some editing choices in this movie, particularly early on, that, you know, if you were being unkind, you would say, well, that's actually kind of amateur, the way that that is edited together. The film does something occasionally in early scenes where they actually do a bit of a jump cut into the same shot, which is a bit of a no-no, and it's sort of breaking some film literacy rules there. Now they try and cheat it with some crossfades, but it's just
Are
stuff
they in
that,
the group scenes?
well, there's a couple of little odd editing moments in those as well, but it's actually the scene where she goes up to the room and she's there with her father and they're talking to each other, and they actually do, it's not quite a jump cut, but it's pretty close, and it's breaking some film laws, not laws, that's, guidelines, if you
Guidelines.
like. Yeah, where it's like, it's not to say you can't do these things, but if you're used to the way movies are edited and you're looking for these things, you go, oh, we don't usually do that. I don't think there's an artistic reason to do that unless I missed it. So therefore, I wonder if there was a performance reason that we made that choice. So, and there's also just a few little, sometimes, particularly as we go on that journey from India to New York, getting out of scenes is sometimes a little bit clunky and doesn't perhaps quite work. But it's just got some moments like that in the edit where I go, that's unusual. You wouldn't usually see that on this level, if you like.
I think we've kind of covered it quite well. I think the last thing to
Oh,
say,
quite well. You
quite
think we
well.
covered it quite well,
I
if
think
you
the
do
last thing
say
I do
so.
want to mention is just some of those child actors. The person, the girl who plays Becky, which is Vanessa Lee Chester, I think is quite well played in her understatement and quietness, right? It's quite easy to make a child actor play quiet, they just don't say much. But in her delivery and her kind of mousy nature she plays in this film, I think it's really nice and subtle, and it works with her acting style as a child, and it's written well in the script. And she gets the lovely ending that she gets. But also some of the other characters, the other kids, they're all kind of a bit broad in their nature, but they're wonderful pieces of the puzzle. I think it's her kind of her best friend, other than Becky. I think what is her name? It's Betsy. Is it Betsy? The
Yeah, I want
redhead
to
girl.
say yes, Betsy. Yes.
Yeah, the redhead girl. She's fantastic. She's kind of this. She doesn't feel like she fits in, and her dad doesn't fit in, and she gets courage from her. And the bully is played quite well as well. The little screaming girl is wonderful with her moment. And I just think, yeah, I think ensemble cast of children, you're right, are hard. And I think this was done in a particular way that helped each one of them have their moment to shine, at least the main girls.
And they're not just kids either, they're young kids, because
Yeah.
it's not like they were sort of, 13, 14, that kind of thing. A lot of them are a lot younger than that. So I think as well, a
Excuse
bit
me.
of interesting kind of trivia for me is that Steven Spielberg must have loved this movie, because he cast two of the actresses from this movie just 2 years later in The Lost World. We get Camilla Bell, who looks about five in this film, as it says here her name's Jane, but I was just like, hey, that's Camilla Bell, but like as a 4 or 5 year old, she looks tiny. And then Vanessa Lee Chester as
Chester.
well, who would also be cast in The Lost World. So I'm like, that's too much of a coincidence to be just
Yeah.
before The Lost World. He must have seen this movie and really liked it. So, but yeah, I think they're both great in that movie as well.
Well, unless you have anything else to say, I can get us into our socials and you
Just
can tell us what movie we're watching next.
just do it. I'm changing up the mix. I'm changing the playlist. I'm making it different. Uh,
If you want to watch or listen to us, you can do so simply by typing in Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. You can do that on YouTube, Spotify, or iTunes. Once you're there, if you like what you hear or see, throw us a like, throw us a subscribe.
Throw it.
Just
Just throw it.
throw it, catch it like the milkman catches Rusty
Draw
Schwimmer.
draw a circle of likingness around a comment of subscribing. No, I don't know. I don't know. It's
You
just
tried, and you
I
know
did.
what? I appreciate you. Like, comment, subscribe. In that comment, what's a great children's ensemble movie you've seen? Harry Potters are out there, Super 8's out there. There's a bunch of movies that have kid casts. You could go back to the Goonies, the kids cast that are wonderful. Tell us what your favorite is, or tell us what you loved about this movie. Tell us if you'd seen this movie before. If you want to follow us on social media, you can do so in a couple of places. Jim_and_Ben for Instagram, and Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures for TikTok. Jim, you say you're flipping the script. You say you're changing the game.
I almost did a double feature where I was going to pick Secret Garden next. I
Oh,
was so close. I was like, and then I went, no, I think we we just need a vibe check. We just need a little vibe check here. So I was like, what is a classic Jim and Ben movie? You know, a place we haven't been for a while, a place we
Thomas
could.
Jane's The
Um,
Punisher.
well, I don't know about it. This is just a film that we're going to have a lot to say on. And honestly, I don't know if you've seen it. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. We're going to 2004. We're going to watch Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow.
How do you think I haven't seen this? I know you.
This film is very odd and kind of amazing and wonderful and weird, and I can't wait to review it and view
I'm
it with
curious
you.
to see how the visuals hold up.
Yeah, well, you'll see. You'll see. And until you do, I will catch you next time on Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures.
Thank you so much, and all of you out there are a princess.
Okay.
All of you
All
are
right.
princesses.
All right. Okay. Goodbye.